Hey everybody, welcome to the Lab Services and Point of Care Testing Show. Star Kristin Talon is with me, ready to rock and roll on something I think a lot of people are starting to tune into for a lot of reasons, but we're talking about why you should be selling hormone test kits and really going beyond just the simple selling of the test kit and breaking it down on how it's a part of your business process overall. So stay tuned, we'll hit the reel and we will get rocking. Kristin, this is kind of a genesis story for you in a certain extent, right? I mean, this is something that you were doing in a previous life, really recognized the overall value of it, and then changed it into the entrepreneurial genius that you are today. Give us a little bit of the backstory for it first, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if I'm an entrepreneurial genius, but I definitely have entrepreneurial spirit. I can't I can't deny or ignore, but you're right. So I was a compounding pharmacist. I was a compounding pharmacist at an independent pharmacy, and they had a lot of pharmacist turnover, but there was one pharmacist who was there prior to me for like 2 decades or something, and she was doing hormone test kits. And I was just a couple years out of college. You know, we don't talk about any of this stuff really in pharmacy school.
Right.
And I had been working at a larger community retail chain, but anyway, up to that point. And I thought, well, that's really cool. I would love to get involved in something that's more, not only more clinical, right, but just something where I feel like I'm serving people a little bit better than, dispensing medication. And so long story short, I'll fast forward you through. I ended up getting trained on bioidentical hormone replacement therapy through the employer that I was with. And it just lit this fire. And it also opened me up into the integrative or functional medicine world. But really, all I was doing prior to even the functional medicine aspect of it, I was simply I came back from the conference. That was a huge training conference. And I came back and I started selling the kits. I was really confident about selling those kits. And also I started selling consultations along with the kits. So pretty much just like a reading of the results. And it was beautiful because it paired with some of the other things that pharmacy was already doing. And again, this was like 7-8 years ago, where when I started kind of doing all of this stuff, or I guess restarted in that pharmacy, but it was great because they had a front end that was heavy in customized supplements, like high-end supplements, and also had a compounding lab as well. And so these kits plus the consultations ended up not only giving me more job satisfaction with what it was that I was doing and the impact that I was making, but it also ended up kind of rolling over and snowballing into these other areas of that pharmacy business.
Oh, so interesting. So when I think of like hormone testing, just in general, Kristin, I remember back when I was in pharmacy school that there was a huge scare tactic kind of put out there with some pretty bad data on the cardiovascular risks of hormone utilization in women. And so that was really pushing, I think, a lot of people, including primary care providers, away from utilizing hormones. So in general, like what was your tactic and ability for primary care providers, that piece of the equation, to come on board with utilizing hormones for their patients and re-educating them on some of those things?
Yeah, such great points, because that is still alive and true, that scare tactic. There's a lot of large medical organizations that still really hold on to that data. And I think if you lined up 100 healthcare practitioners, we'd all just split into different, thought processes and feelings on the whole hormonal component. But not getting into that, what I ended up focusing on was the menopausal women population who were really struggling with all of those symptoms, and they weren't finding answers anywhere else. Yep. And so I was so blessed at that time to have great collaborations with the local OBGYN office. And so not because of myself, but because of the pharmacy that I was working at. Full transparency, they had been there for decades. Wow. So whenever I was writing my recommendations up on a letterhead that said the name of the pharmacy that I worked with, I think there was a level of not respect, but
trust, huh?
Trust. Yes. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. There was a level of trust instantly because I was part of an established business in the area. And so, but also too, the other side of that I absolutely needed, it was that doctor to then be willing to trust what it was that I was recommending and form that collaboration and the other side of that team. And so there were a couple specific providers that were very open to collaborating and starting these BHRT regimens on patients based on test results. And so then that relationship was huge in order to get the patients the actual medication that they needed. And yes, it was also beneficial for, the pharmacy business as well. But we were serving a population that nobody else was serving. And the only reason we were able to do that truly was because of that collaboration with the provider in that patient population.
Got it. That makes so much sense. I mean, I think there's a ton of people like in our profession right now, Kristin, that are really honing in on this to provide like additional education. I know some of your nice colleagues like Nadia Archambault and Rajinder Rai and Steve Goldring, a number of individuals that are doing these kinds of things, focusing on trying to help women utilize hormones to be better with what they're doing. So some good educational sources there. And I'm sure there's more. Please plug them, Kristin, for people to be able to follow, because I think our profession needs to know more about the actual science behind it, right? I mean, for us to be able to say hormone test kits, and Kristin, there's some people that are watching this and going, the hormones are bad. Like, we don't give hormones to patients because that'll cause a cardio or metabolic issue that will happen for them and be deleterious to their overall health. To be able to dismiss that, or maybe not dismiss it, to be able to educate on that, we need to be able to follow some folks that really are, following the right trends. Any people when you were first getting educated that were inspirations for you or today?
Oh man, these companies that are selling these test kits, obviously their product is the test, obviously, but they have such reputable clinicians and physicians on their boards and as a part of their businesses that they just push out so much education that is usually free just from you having an account with them, which is enormously helpful. And I lean on those companies, and I think I honestly recommend every person getting involved in this type of area, just lean on the company because they will guide you. Especially the really good quality ones, the more reputable companies, you can trust what it is that they're sharing with you, that the information is not just for them to sell a kit, right? So I lean on those companies a lot. And well, I was going to say something else about, just because you're doing a hormone panel does not mean that this patient needs hormones. So I can't tell you how many times the consultations turned into like a custom supplement regimen, or we're starting to make lifestyle modifications because truly when somebody, that at menopause where it's such a transition of life stages, right? And there's a lot going on there that can be unpacked, but stress and thyroid function has a lot to do with our sex hormones. It's not just the level of estrogen and progesterone going on in the body. It has a lot to do with nutrition as well. So if there's someone listening to us talking about this thinking, I'm not touching hormones, I don't want to get a doctor involved, all the obstacles, that it really shouldn't limit you, because there's so many things that you can do to help that patient without getting some type of prescription for a hormone.
Smart. So well said. So let's talk about those supplements, Kristin, a little bit. Like when you made the transition for individuals from going, hey, let's get this tested, and then they had an epiphany moment, like, okay, these are my numbers. You're able to break it down for them, which great. Now we can have a consultation fee kind of put inside of there, and a relationship between Kristin and patient that's deeper than a medication passing across the table. So big win. But the next piece is that recommendation kind of scaling, moving into the supplement space. How did you navigate that? How did you create kind of the Kristin formulary to be able to use? What are some things that our listeners could be able to grab onto and do?
Yeah. So how did I get the clinical information to do that?
Yeah, the clinical information, or just like choosing the supplements that you wanted to be able to plug in, and make those recommendations a little more seamless. So you're not going back to the textbook and looking it up for, each individual.
Absolutely. And so when you're first getting started, if you don't have any education in this space, you didn't miss it in pharmacy school. They didn't give it to you in the first place. So if you are starting from square one, again, with these really reputable companies, they have clinicians on staff that for free of charge will go through the lab results on patients. And some of them will give you very detailed suggestions on what they may or may not do. Now, obviously, there's that gray area, right? You need to then use your clinical judgment as to whether or not those things are appropriate for that patient in front of you. But that's a great place to start. Like, that's really where I started. And then you start to ask them for resources. Come from a place of humility. That's really my biggest recommendation, because just because you are a pharmacist doesn't mean you know everything. And I'm somebody who's always asking questions, and I don't, when you ask questions, then it opens you up to other areas that you can go for resources. So when I'm talking to one of those clinicians at these companies, my question at the end of every call is like, oh, do you know a book or a website or a blog article that would be really good about this topic? Mm-hmm. And just slowly but surely, you just start to put it all together. Now, I am personally going through the School of Applied Functional Medicine is a larger functional medicine actual certification that is 2+ years long. I'm almost at the end of that. So that's been really helpful. But for somebody who doesn't want to do that type of deep dive into something, there's a lot of resources you can lean on. Really just balancing cortisol and stress, learning some different supplements and adaptogens that you can use to help with that, and balancing that estrogen progesterone dynamic with helping with metabolizing estrogen out more. A lot of women are what's called estrogen dominant. Those two topics really, and thyroid a little bit, you will be able to help nearly every person that walks in your door in one way, shape, or form just with those couple topics.
That's so helpful. Yeah, because I think it's like, drinking the ocean sometimes when we start to look at some of these spaces. And so just being able to find the right resources, gravitate toward being an expert in the right things that are those 80/20s, the 20% of information, 80% of the population you're serving, is just super helpful. Potentially next episode, Kristin, for us to be able to kind of pull on board is the next piece of that. When you go from getting the hormone test, making some of the supplement recommendations, and then beyond, when it comes to the other clinical services and things that can be offered on top of that you were mentioning, we can definitely tie it in for the audience. Any parting words for everybody before we say, see you next week?
No, I don't have anything else for today, but I love this. I love this topic because it's not just about, I think a lot of times people associate hormone panel with menopausal woman. I need a physician to then write a prescription. There's a ton of controversy about hormones. You don't have to go that route. And not to mention, men also need help with their hormones, because even though we talk about testosterone all the time, it's missed and they're dismissed. And then also our younger female population with fertility issues and PCOS, our world needs help. And it's not just these little segments of people.
Yeah, so. Kevin's nerdy brain the whole time is thinking, how can I plug this in? So I'll do it now. I just find some of the studies in wearables right now really fascinating, Kristin, with hormone cycling, especially for female athletes that are seeing like, here's where performance is going to be best. Here's where training elements are going to be best. And just really tapping into like, how is your body naturally cycling? So you have a better idea of how things are working out for you as an individual athlete. And the exact same thing that you were mentioning when it comes to, then I'm a high performance athlete and want to get pregnant or have other issues that may pop up. Why? Now having some of the information behind you on how your hormone levels are doing, huge aid for a lot of those individuals. Thank you, Kristin. You are always the best. Everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, everyone.